welcome to another episode of Exalted Higher. I am so excited that you have joined us this week. And my guest this week has served as a vocal coach. Now get this, for such artists as Carrie Job for King of Country, Phil Wickham, Elevation Worship, one of my favorites, and more. And he's the founder of the Unhindered Voice. And I discovered this gentleman through one of his webinars that he does in helping singers do singing a little bit better. And so we're going to just have a little conversation on how, as a Christian artist, you can get your vocal pipes prepared for ministry and for service for the Lord. So welcome to the show, Jeff MATHENA. Thank you for being with us.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for having me. I'm honored.
So tell us your story. Tell us about this. Your company is called the Unhindered Voice. So tell us about that.
Yeah, well, I wasn't always a vocal coach. I started, my first job out of college was as a worship leader. I worked in full-time vocational ministry. And like a lot of people, encountered some church wounds as a result of that. And in my mid-20s, got married and was trying to figure out what to do with my life. And fortunately had a vocal coach in my younger years that was highly influential, that had encouraged me to start coaching, and when I was 19, had no interest. But by the time I got to my mid-20s, thought, maybe this is what I'm meant to do. And so long story short, as I ended up moving to Nashville to coach alongside this mentor, the last 10 years or so have been kind of a whirlwind of working alongside the church, working with these touring artists. And just in 2020, I moved my family actually back to Texas, where we came from. And for me, I think that really represented sort of a coming alongside the church in a lot of ways. My time in Nashville was great, and I continue to work with touring artists, continue to work with industry people, but my heart is really for worship leaders and the people that are singing in our communities around the country. And so my plan was to come alongside them. Of course, I moved in the middle of March of 2020, and as we all know, nature threw some curveballs at us.
Right.
And so I've had to adjust my plan a little bit and adapt just like everybody else. But now I live in Fort Worth, Texas with my family, continuing to coach, doing these virtual events where you first, I guess, found out about me. And here I am.
Yeah. So when you say you come alongside the churches, how is that involved? What's your passion for that?
I have found that there are so many worship leaders around the country, and their story goes something like this. They have a background in singing, or they have some natural talent singing. And so somewhere along the line, somebody said, you should sing on Sunday. And they were given this platform and they were happy to do it. But then before long, they find themselves sort of feeling like they're in over their heads. And they're being asked to sing songs that are written by Hillsong and Elevation and Bethel. And there are these songs that are amazing songs, but they can be pretty difficult to sing for the average singer. Mm-hmm. And so working with people and helping them realize, working with worship leaders and helping them realize that they are absolutely capable of leading authoritatively and leading confidently on Sundays. I find that that's really where the need is in terms of a vocal coach. It's fun to work with artists that are touring and are playing to thousands of people. But I feel like the biggest impact I have the potential of making is with people that are singing to 200 or 500 or 1,000 people on Sunday mornings that are serving faithfully and are looking for somebody to support them and to believe in them and to help them really discover what the full potential of their voice really is.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. I'm going to ask you a question. I've asked this to another vocal coach that I interviewed. What's the importance to you? What is the importance of vocal training? Why is it that I need to have, why is that important to me as a singer?
That's a really good question, because I think you get a lot of different answers, or you get a lot of sort of re, regurgitated answers with that. Um, and I think the church tends to answer that on a spectrum. And on one end of the spectrum, you have churches that say, well, there's no reason that the church shouldn't be um, the center of sort of the pinnacle of artistic achievement in our culture. And so we should be really good. So let's strive to be really good. And they just kind of take it at face value. And I think what's wrong with that is that it defines excellence, biblical excellence, according to achievement, that there's
Mm.
some standard that we're setting for themselves. A lot of times it's maybe set by music that we're seeing outside the church, and we go, well, we should be at least as good as that.
Mhm.
And to me, excellence is not about achievement, it's not about the end goal, it's about the process. On the other end of the spectrum, you have churches that say, that are very concerned with humility, as they should be, with keeping Christ at the center of their worship services, as they should be. But what that translates to is worship leaders that are almost afraid to get better because they think, well, if I sing better than I am, that's only going to draw more attention to myself, and that's not really the goal, right? So to me, I think it's so important that we answer that question in a biblical way. And to me, I think the answer is found in 1 Corinthians 9. So in 1 Corinthians 9, Paul is talking about all of the rights that he denies himself in service of the gospel, right? So he doesn't take wages from the churches that he plants because he doesn't want somebody to come up to him and say, hey, Paul, the only reason that you plant churches is because when you do, you get another paycheck. He says, guess again, I don't
Mm.
even take money, right?
Mhm.
I don't eat meat sacrificed to idols, and I deny myself. He even says, I enslave myself to all men. And he does it so that he can remove all the hindrances that might make him a less effective minister of the gospel. And at the end of the passage, he talks about preparing for his ministry as, a boxer prepares for a fight, or a runner prepares for a race. And what he's doing is he is acknowledging that his flesh is an opponent that is constantly rising up to try to prevent him from accomplishing his mission. And I
Mm.
think that singers understand better than anybody what it's like to have a body that doesn't obey you, right? So we sing on Sunday, we go, all right, voice, I want you to hit this note with this tone in this kind of way, and the voice just says, no,
No.
we don't do that. And so what Paul is telling us is that our flesh and our body's unwillingness to obey us can disqualify us from the task at hand of being ministers of the gospel. So I think the first reason is simply that singers ought to discipline their voices so it learns to obey them, so that it can be the vehicle through which they are communicating truth rather than their opponent. The second reason is because what we're really trying to do when we train the voice is we're trying to bring our voice back into alignment with the way that God designed it to function.
I love that phrase right there. I love that.
So this is what the unhindered voice, this is why I named it the unhindered voice. So if you think about a voice that is without hindrance, hindrance of brokenness, hindrance of self-consciousness, hindrance of a body that doesn't obey us. Really, the only two voices in history that would have been truly unhindered would have belonged to Adam and Eve,
Mhm.
because they were at one point without sin, and they were immortal, right? Even Jesus was
Mhm.
born into a broken world. His body was mortal,
Right.
though he didn't know sin. And what's amazing is the first words that we see from a human are in Genesis 2. And it's when Adam and Eve are getting married, it's at the scene of their wedding. And it's essentially a love song. Adam is singing, bone of my bone, flesh of my flesh, at last I shall go, right? He's saying, I didn't realize it until now, but I'm incomplete without you. And it was sung, or at least I believe it was. I don't think it would have made sense for him to do anything but sing. And I'm willing to bet that after the ceremony, he didn't pull Eve aside and say, you know, how is the bridge? Like, did I nail the note on the bridge like I thought I did? Right? And Eve wasn't like, it sounded great, but honestly, I was worshiping. So I really wasn't paying attention, and Adam after that wasn't like, oh, good. That's what you should have been doing. So often that's what worship leaders do, right? They hit this note, they walk off stage feeling self-conscious about what they did. They go to their friend, they say, how did it sound? And the friend's like, we were worshiping. And then that just makes the worship leader feel even worse because they're like, great, I wasn't valuing that enough. See, Adam and Eve, their voices were a vehicle for pure expression. They were a vehicle for living in the moment and worshiping God and living in community without any thought of the self. And to me, that's the reason that discipline is called for in 1 Corinthians 9 is to try to get some semblance of that back. It's really trying to get some glimpse of what we were meant for and what has been promised for us when we're in heaven and sin is no more. That ultimately is what vocal training is about.
Deuteronomy chapter 20, verse 4 says, for the Lord your God is the one who goes with you to fight for you against your enemies to give you the victory. Here's a couple stories about that. I was just a shepherd boy, without a shield, without a sword, fed up with the giant's voice, screaming curses to the Lord. I walked down the hill alone, with a pocket full of real stones. But what the Philistine couldn't see is what I had was more than me. See, on my own I'm weak, but my God fights for me. I was servant to the king, interpreting his crazy dreams. I won't worship mortal men, so they threw me in the lion's den. Vicious teeth were all I saw, but something came and shut their jaws. Couldn't find a scratch on me. In fact, that night I fell asleep when morning came and shocked them all. 'Cause my God fights for me.
I stumbled into the room with alabaster and my wounds. I could feel their judging eyes as I fell before the Christ. I poured my oil upon his feet. I didn't care who saw me weep. I gave up all I had that day. He should have sent me on my way, but instead he lifted up my head, 'cause my God fights for me. Whoa. He's my shield, he's my sword, the victory is the Lord's. He's my shield, he's my sword, the victory is the Lord's.
So what's your story here today? And what's the giant in your way? Are you trapped and can't get out? Or are you staring down a lion's mouth? Can you stand before the Lord? Or do you need to hit the floor? It don't matter what you've done, cause the battle is already won. So lift your voice with me and sing that my God fights for me. Oh yeah. So lift your voice in victory, cause my God fights for me.
There will come a day when God will be our light, and the dark of night will be sent to its grave. And there will come a time where we will live forever in a city that will never pass away. Oh, how my soul yearns and even faints.
Hey y'all, it's me, Jordan Felice. I started touring full-time almost 4 years ago. I went from kind of this phase of I'm playing like a couple times a year to playing 100 to almost 200 shows a year. It takes a lot of wear and tear on your voice, and you kind of have to learn how to navigate that whole process, and I was really bad at it. And then all of a sudden, I met this guy, Jeff MATHENA. He completely changed my life vocally. All of a sudden, I was capable of doing things that I'd never really dreamed of, and they were easier. So, I mean, if you're an artist, or if you're singing in church on Sunday, or if you're just trying to become a better singer, the person that will facilitate the breakthrough that you are looking for, whether it's in a physical form or a mental form, is Jeff. You gotta call him. Go check out The Unhindered Voice. I can't talk highly enough about him. Go check it out right now.
Now, one of the things that I think is important, and I believe you had mentioned it, or I took a quote from your bio or something, and you used the term a ready voice. And so my question was, what are the benefits spiritually to have a ready voice for worship? And I think you've already answered it. When we are prepared, it's like a minister that's going to bring the message. He's got to study the scripture. He has to have the Lord open up his understanding how to interpret that scripture and then deliver it. He also has to be prayed up. So a lot of what you're saying, all of that preparation is being prayed up, warm up those vocal cords, and be ready. Be a ready voice. Be a ready voice. And I think that's so special. Let's talk a little bit about some of the techniques that are involved in a singer warming up their vocal cords before they get ready to sing. And I know you need to do a lot more than just the 5 minutes before you step out on stage. So let's talk a little bit about that last minute impromptu warming up your vocals and the weeks and months prior to that of training to get to that point. Because I know there's a couple of things we talked about a little earlier that I struggled with my vocal coach, but I'm learning how to do it. But let's talk a little bit about a couple of those. Either one.
Yeah.
Pick one.
Yeah, I think about professional athletes that always say things like, the game is won off the field, or it's won off the court. It's all of the work that you put into before it really matters. And I think singing is no different. The way that we train our voices should be such that when we are standing at the edge of the stage, we can, with clear conscience and full hearts, be able to say, I've done the work. I've done everything I can to prepare for this moment. And now I can walk on stage and allow God to use the work that I've done up to this moment, however he sees fit.
Mm,
On the other hand, when you have done no work leading up to the moment that you walk on stage, really all you're doing is throwing up a hope and a prayer, and you're saying, this is really on me now. This is on me because I've got to get my voice to do what I want it to. And as any singer that is watching this, that is relating to that sort of scenario, they know it rarely, if ever, works. The best possible outcome when you haven't done any work, it's like every single Sunday you come up against the same problem. And some Sundays you feel like it didn't go horribly and maybe even went kind of well. And other Sundays it doesn't go well at all. And you're just kind of waiting to find out every Sunday. You're hoping you're going to wake up on Sunday morning with a voice that's ready to go. And the inconsistency speaks to a lack of discipline.
yeah.
Now, in terms of what you actually do on Sunday morning, the number one tip that I give to worship leaders, especially if they're trying to warm up early on Sunday morning when the voice does not want to warm up, right? You're getting up at 5 or 6 in the morning, it's as so many worship leaders are doing. You've got to get your blood flow moving before a warm up is ever going to be effective. So the vocal cords need blood flow to become warm, just like any other part of your body, but they're not big enough to call blood flow throughout the entire body. So I recommend people go for a walk, collect your
Really?
thoughts, get some blood flow moving, or do some push-ups, do some jumping jacks, like something to get that blood flow moving, and so that your body actually feels awake before you ever start your vocal warm-up. That can make a huge difference. But the other thing is you need a vocal warm-up that's actually effective. And of course, we could talk about that's a lot of what the webinar in which you attended, that's
Right.
a lot of what that was about. Side note, when people find out that I'm a vocal coach, or singers find out that I'm a vocal coach just in conversation, probably the most common thing that I hear said is this sort of sheepish confession that they never really warm up their voice. And the guy, I know I should warm up my voice. And I always say, well, no, you shouldn't. If you have not been given an effective warm up, if you have not been given a warm up that's actually going to help your voice perform better, what is the point in doing it? A lot of vocal warm ups lead singers to sort of shout and yell and again, just kind of lunge at these notes, hoping that they work well. And when that's the case, a lot of singers, I think, feel like the warm up is only decreasing the number of times that they can hit those notes well. And so they go, I'm just not even going to worry about it. But a singer who's been given an effective warm up that actually makes them better when they walk on stage and actually enables them to get through an entire Sunday without becoming pitchy and without becoming fatigued, you don't have to convince them to do that warm up again. Because doing the warm up is so much better than struggling the rest of the day.
Right.
And so, you wake up, you get your blood flow moving, and you utilize an effective vocal warm up. And when you do that, it can make all of the difference. And of course, then I could even go back further and say, get a good night's sleep on Saturday. But now we're just getting into common sense.
That is common sense. Well, I certainly learned a lot from listening to your webinar, and let's talk about those webinars. Are you still going to be doing the webinars? I mean, are you?
Yeah, I do them periodically throughout the year. So right now I'm in a stretch of doing them. I do them a few times. But then even when I'm not doing the one you attended, usually I'm doing some other smaller ones that are a little more topical. Not long ago, I did one that was specifically on vibrato. I'll do one in a few months that's about fixing the break. So I'm kind of doing various types of virtual events. And even now that hopefully the pandemic is starting to wind down a little bit, I might even start getting into some more live events as well. But I'm constantly looking for ways to bring training to people and make it as accessible as possible to people. So by the time this airs, there will absolutely still be opportunities for people to go to my website and sign up for something.
Awesome. Well, I do pray that all works well for you to continue this ministry. I don't call it a business, it's a ministry to help vocalists, not just worship leaders, but just your background vocals. Background vocalists need to have that type of training as
Absolutely,
well.
they do.
And I can tell the difference when I have not done my homework ahead of time and end up stepping out on stage with that little short last minute warm up. It just doesn't work. You've got to start weeks and weeks ahead of time. It makes a world of difference. Jeff MATHENA, thank you so much for joining us. And I look forward to perhaps another conversation when you come out with the next big venture. Who knows? We shall see.
I hope so.
Thank you so much. And if anyone is interested in more information about Jeff's ministry, would you share how they can get in touch with you? Jeff?
Yes, you can go to theunhinderedvoice.com and you can find all about the different avenues for vocal training, and some are free events, or and some are, paid memberships, private lessons, all that kind of,
Sure.
all levels of things.
Awesome. And we'll have more information tagged at the end of the show. Thank you so much for joining us, everybody. And we'll see you next week on Exalted Higher. Remember to lift his name higher. Jeff, thank you. Thank you.